Hello, hello. Welcome back to B&J's Little Farm. Waiting for it to pop up here. Does it say it was live? Does it say it's live?
Yeah.
There's a red live button at the top that says we're live?
Yeah.
Okay. I got one person in the chat. This says it's still waiting to go live.
The timer's going, so it says live.
Okay. Why is this one taking so long to catch up? Alright, there I am. I see me now. Hello, hello. Just wait a few more minutes, see if anybody pops in. We are on chapter 40 tonight. Hopefully you can hear me okay. We got 3 in the house now. Please remember to hit that thumbs up. Share me out if you have the capability. It really helps out. All right, we got 3 in the house, so I'm going to go ahead and start. Again, we are on chapter 40. After Frank's arms, I knew nothing until I found myself in bed, alternately hot and cold, throat parched, chest tight, but I needed to be with Ollie. I threw back the covers, or I thought I did. They barely fluttered. I groaned, closed my burning eyes, then cool covered my forehead. A wet cloth. I tried to reach for it, but it hurt to move. So I scrambled to sleep. We got 4 in the house now. Hello, hello. I dreamed strange dreams of Mama and Will and Daddy and Aunt Annabelle. Arthur and Sheriff Jeffries even made appearances. After those sweet children. Far off in the distance, I recognized Frank. I knew his face, only his back, but somehow I knew him. Finally, my eyes opened to darkness. I sat up, head pounding with pain. I'm here, Rebecca. Who? Frank. An arm cradled my back. Drink this. Tart liquid dribbled into my mouth. Sleep now. But Ollie, shush. A hand stroked my hair. Just get yourself well. Hey, Angel Vlogs, good to see you. Thank you so much. I tried to focus on his face, but my eyes wouldn't cooperate. So I returned my head to the pillow, drifting again into crowded slumber. People I loved and who loved me jumbled together, saying things I knew they'd never say. I walked among them in confusion, no one speaking to me directly. I asked everyone what I should do, where I should go, but not one head turned in my direction. I could only listen. I woke again, every bone alive with aching. Daylight now, eyes focusing more clearly. No one sat in the chair by my bed. I pushed myself up, reached for a cup of water on the table next to me. Let me help. The cup lifted, held to my lips by hands much stronger than mine. Thank you. Hot tears slid down my hot cheeks, stealing the clarity of my vision. Don't cry, Rebecca. Please don't cry. It sounded like Frank. Yet, would he be so solace towards me? Another apprehension, I imagine. I eased back down to sleep, anxious to shut out the pain that filled my chest with every breath. More dreams. Then my brain registered. The birds outside my window. My eyes recognized the sunshine streaming through the window. I shifted beneath the covers and spied Sheriff Jeffries dozing in the chair by my bed. I sat up too fast, spinning the world around me. My shaky hand went to my head, trying to still the motion. The sheriff hovered over me, touching my cheek and my forehead, without permission or embarrassment. He closed his eyes and fell back into his chair. You gave us quite a scare, Rebecca. You've been in bed 2 days. I attempted to pull threads of thought from a tangled ball of memory. Ollie? She's been asking for you. I swung my feet over the side of the bed, noticing a rumple. Thank you, Angel. Skirt covering my knees instead of my nightdress. At least I had that much dignity left. The sheriff helped me stand, his shoulder and arm bearing my weight. I'll take you to her. I wanted to voice my thanks, but I couldn't manage the words. I had to concentrate on the steps. I had to get to Ollie. Frank slept in the chair beside Ollie's bed, his elbow propped on a table, his hand holding his head somewhat upright. As we entered the room, he leapt to his feet. His confused gaze searched my face, and then his eyes narrowed at the sheriff. Should she be out of bed? Gravely words. Fevers broke. A clipped response. I looked from one man to the other, trying to comprehend the antagonism that crackled the air between them. A shiver swayed me. Each man's face softened, but I disregarded this concern. I needed to know about Ollie. She looked so tiny in the middle of her parents' bed, a slick, almost bloodless face. My stomach clutched. Was she dead? Then I realized that no spot shadowed her eyes or her cheeks. Her body shook with a deep cough. I winced, trying to suppress the answering one creeping up my own throat. Frank reached across the bed and felt her face and the back of her neck. He dropped back into his chair. She's fine. I wavered. Frank jumped up, caught hold of my arm, and kept me upright. He led me to bed and urged me to lie beside Ollie. As the fog in my head cleared further, fear pounced at me like a threatened bobcat. Where are the boys? And Janie? Tell me. I gripped Frank's shirt sleeves. They're fine. They're at the Henshaws. Under the weather, but not the flu. Definitely not the flu. I looked to the sheriff. He nodded once. Truly, my gaze held Frank's. He wouldn't lie to me. He couldn't, I promise. Hello, Julianne West. Good to see you. Thanks for coming in. I let out my breath and relaxed into the pillow propped behind me. Then I remembered Irene, the news of Beulah and her hasty exit. Irene? Now Frank refused to look anywhere but Ollie's face. I held my breath. Not Irene. Please, God, not Irene. A fit of coughing shook me. Frank's tortured eyes found me. But it was Sheriff Jeffries who found a cup of water. I sipped until the coughing calmed. I lifted my eyes to the sheriff. If Frank wouldn't tell me about my friend, he'd have to. The dogs there. The sheriff refused to hold my gaze. I pushed up from the bed, clung to his arm. I have to go. In spite of my dry eyes, my voice sounded gruff and full of moisture. Please, take me to her. His gaze slipped to the floor. Please, Henry. His head rose. I hadn't expected to see quite so much anticipation in his eyes, but I pushed my uneasiness aside. I had to be with my friend, as she had been with me. The corner of his mouth lifted. You might want to change clothes. If I'd had the strength, I'd thrown my arms around his neck. Frank pushed apart us. She's not going anywhere until she eats something. Watching him retreat into the kitchen, I wondered why I couldn't restrain the upward twitch of my lip. By the time I consumed some oatmeal and coffee, given myself a bird bath, and changed my clothes, the sun had risen to full height, and I had to lie down again. Go for me, Henry. Please, I have to know. He finally agreed. After he climbed into his car and chugged away, I sat at Ollie's bedside and watched Frank coax broth between his daughter's lips. 7 precious days had slipped away as Ollie, then I, fought off the Spanish lady that claimed Aunt Annabelle. Days I could never regain. I figured up just over 3 weeks remained until I must board the train and leave this family behind. No more Daddy, no more. Ollie's wrath rent my heart. Frank dabbed her lips with a damp cloth, and her eyes closed in restful sleep. I straightened the top of the quilt near Ollie's chin. A rush of tears dammed behind my eyes, my nose, my cheeks. I took a deep breath, pushed Ollie's hair from her face as I'd done for my aunt, and I laid my hand on her cheek, thankful for the coolness. The horror of my vigil over Aunt Annabelle returned as a knot in my chest. Did Irene share that experience now, or was she in the oblivion of fever as Ollie and I had been? And Mama, she couldn't fight off the rages of the flu a second time. And what if Daddy should fall ill? She certainly didn't have the strength to nurse him. What are you thinking? Frank's words came so soft I wasn't sure I heard them. I tried to smile to break the sorrow that stretched between us, thinking about Mama and Will and Annabelle. Clara's unspoken name shouted itself into the silence. My eyes sought his face. Irene won't die too, will she? We can pray. He bowed his head, his voice booming now as he implored the God of the universe to spare the life of his friend. Although tears rolled down my cheeks, I smiled as I watched him pray. Deep faith, strong character, and a love for others. Could there be a finer man? Thank you, I said when he finished. I wondered if I imagined the tremble in his hand as he straightened the covers over his daughter. Living by Faith, hello and welcome. Thanks for coming in. Irene's not any worse, but the baby. Sheriff Jeffrey's hat spun between his hands. I stood in spite of the wooziness in my head. I have to go to her. Henry took my hand, led me back to the sofa. She'll need you more later, I think. My hands dropped limp into my lap as Frank came into the parlor and sprawled in a chair. His stubbled chin and shadowed eyes sank into my understanding. He hadn't rested in days, what with nursing Ollie. Please, Frank, get some rest. I'll watch her, I promise. I glanced at the sheriff. He didn't look nearly as haggard as Frank. Sheriff Jeff Henry will stay a while longer and help. Frank didn't protest as I expected. Instead, he tugged from the room, bent like an old man with a lifetime of burdens. My throat ached with longing, but I knew he didn't want me. He considered me only a blessed help in his time of trouble, nothing more. I held out my hand to the sheriff, forced my dry lip to smile. Come help me take care of my girl. Hey, Vermont, good to see you. Thanks for coming in. We just got done with chapter 40, and we are now on chapter 41. 3 days after my feet steadied on the ground again, I stood in the graveyard by the church, a cold wind whipping my skirt around my legs and snaking up my stocking-clad legs. A pale-faced Brother Latham stood over the gaping hole, eyes raw with grief. Irene's bundled shoulders shook as she wept silently. I laced my arm through hers, but liquid fear dotted my forehead. What if she swooned? I didn't think I could hold her up. But even as the thought crossed my mind, Frank reached over and anchored her from the opposite side. I smiled my thanks, but his face remained blank, as if he grieved a loved one instead of Irene. And maybe he did. Maybe this burial made his wife's more real. Brother Latham paused several times during the service, but he made it through, prayed a final prayer, and dropped the first handful of dirt on Beulah's child-sized box below. I winced as the hard clods banged on the soft wood. so different from the squish and plop of Aunt Annabelle's final farewell. I squished my fingers around Irene's arm as she bent forward to do what her husband had done. I turned away as the earth fell from her hand, trying to mute the sound. Then, at Brother Latham's direction, I led Irene towards the church. She needed to sit to rest, as did I. Doc Rising took my arm as Frank gave Irene his full strength to lean on. We climbed the steps, and then Frank slipped back to the gravesite. Instead, I unwrapped Irene's shawl, unbuttoned her coat, led her back to the back pew. She bowed her head. Doc Rising found us there, pulled me just out of earshot. She needs time to recover, body and soul. I nodded. I'll do whatever I can to help. His mustache twitched. And what about the others that need your care? Frank can handle them. He's who I was meaning. He's walking on edge of illness himself, with nursing ye old Ollie back. He's walking on the edge of illness himself, with what nursing ye and Ollie both. Nursing us both. His bushy eyebrows inched up and down like caterpillars across the sidewalk. Hey, girl, didn't you know? But Sheriff Jeffries, the fog in my brain vaguely remembered Frank by my bed. Smoothing words, gentle hands, but hadn't I dreamed that? Doc shook his head. Sheriff didn't come until the last. He took the little ones to the Crenshaws, but he had other things to tend. My mouth gasped as my head whirled in confusion. Frank took care of me and Ollie, but how could he manage us both? Hey, Sunflower Prepper, thanks for coming in. Blamed if I know, but he did. Better than most, I might add. Went without sleep, without food. Doc shook his head. Couldn't bear to lose either one. Either one? My throat tightened and tears blurred my vision. Could it be true? Rebecca? Irene's voice croaked like an old woman's, clawing at my heart. I'm here. I knelt beside her. She closed her hand over mine as she hauled in a bucket full of air. Thank you. I don't know what I'd have done without you. Nola Jean's a good girl, but she doesn't understand. Not like another mother. Another mother? Did she really think of me like that? I felt so young, so inadequate, in the face of her grief. I'd never birthed my own child, let alone buried one, but after watching Ollie suffer, I guess I had more understanding than a schoolgirl would. She squeezed my hand and forced another smile, all at the same time. The Lord gives and the Lord taketh away. I still choose to bless the name of the Lord. I pressed my lips together. If she could believe those words in light of the death of her child, I determined I could too, even if every desire of my heart ended in destruction. I stayed over at the Lathams the next day to help, though Nola Jean took care of things. I sat with Irene, letting her talk about whatever came to mind. When the silence stifled, I asked her a question, forcing her to think beyond her pain. Tell me about Frank and the sheriff. They don't seem to be friends exactly. Oh, honey, that's an old tale now, but neither one of them can seem to forget. Clara used to laugh at both of them, like two dogs circling a carcass picked clean. Annabelle used to say. I laughed. Mama would not have approved of such an expression. What happened? Irene sighed. It was just after Clara and Frank came here. You know all about that, I expect. Ollie told me the story. I wondered if Irene knew about the story Ollie had told me of Nola Jean's younger suitor. As if reading my thoughts, Nola Jean arrived with 2 cups of tea. Irene held her daughter's hand a long minute before letting go. Nola Jean didn't linger. Irene sipped her tea. Claire and Frank, both of them, no more than children, rented a room at the at Jeffrey's house. I leaned forward. I hadn't expected that. Henry was right about their age, but still in school. Frank went off and worked on the railroad, hoarding money to buy that farm. That left Clara and Henry often in each other's company. Clara invited sympathy with her frailty, just the kind men like to champion. Unlike me, a girl with gumption. Maybe that's why Mama kept trying to arrange things. She feared I'd end up like Aunt Annabelle, far from home, taking care of other people's families. I chewed on my thumbnail. I guess she had a right to fear that. Irene set her cup aside and leaned her head on the back of the chair. Really wasn't anything to tell. Frank came home late one night, found them together in the parlor, playing checkers, if I remember right. He was young. He hauled off and hit Henry square in the nose. Clara was furious, and they never reconciled. Henry and Frank kept a truce mostly. Then Frank left for the war. Clara and Annabelle needed Henry's help, and he always gave it. It explained some things, but not what I felt to be a recent deepening of that rift. I'm glad you told me. Irene looked right into my eyes, and I felt she could read all the way to the bottom of my heart. Be careful with them, Rebecca, with both of them. Hey, Jeffrey, good to see you. That's all right, Jeffrey. I understand. My stomach twisted, my mouth went dry. I gulped the rest of my tea, wishing I could tell Irene all my uncertainties, my fears about Henry, about Frank, about my ability to know my own heart, but she had burdens enough to bear at the moment, so I remained silent. As I carried our empty cups to the kitchen, I realized Irene's intimidation terrified and excited me all at the same time. All right, chapter 42, and this is the last one for this evening. Brother Latham preached from the 6th chapter of Matthew, the Sunday after we buried his youngest child. I latched on to verse 34. Take therefore no thought for the morrow shall take thought for the things of itself. Sufficient unto the day is the evil thereof. It was easier said than done, for my thoughts constantly drifted towards the dwindling number of days and Frank's continued refusal to discuss telling the children of my upcoming departure. I tried to force my mind away from Frank and Henry and Irene, and how it would rip out my heart to leave Ollie, James, Dan, and Janie behind. My heart swelled as I watched Janie change each day, my baby. At least she felt like mine, and that made the battle over worry even more difficult. Day passed into night, night into day, yet each bird with wings outspread reminded me again that God cared for me, that He knew every wind that blew my way and changed my direction, and He knew the days that remained of my welcome in this home. So when a few days later the chug of an automobile up our road caught my ear, I instructed myself not to worry as I wiped my hands and stepped out onto the side porch. The automobile didn't have the distinctive sound of Sheriff Jeffrey's car, but it had to be him. I'd prayed for the Lord to make clear my future. Was this his answer? What would Henry say? Be with me, Lord. I picked up Janie, thankful that the boys helped Frank in the furthest field from the house. The engine sputtered and stopped. I pinched color into my cheeks before stepping into the yard, wanting the soft grass to mute my footfalls. Janie clapped her hands and laughed. I hugged her to me as we rounded the front corner of the house, but I didn't recognize the roadster parked near the fence, nor the young man in the driver's seat. He whistled and pointed at another man, one standing. What just happened? Sorry, my phone just did something. I don't know what happened. Last Thursday night, I lost a friend of mine. He was 19 years old. His memorial services on Wednesday on my birthday. Oh, I'm so sorry to hear that, Jeffrey. It's horrible. Let's see. He whistled and pointed at another man, one standing at the front door. That man spun around. There you are. Arthur rushed down the steps to where I stood frozen. He looked serious, solemn even. His arms reached out as if to embrace me, then dropped to his side. What are you doing here, Arthur? My voice held a flatness I hardly recognized, and my heart didn't skip a beat. He glanced back toward his friend in the car before leaning closer to my ear. We need to talk. Then talk. I shifted Janie's weight to my other hip. He cleared his throat and shuffled his feet. Listen, Rebecca, I've been thinking. His gaze moved to Janie, to the ground. I was too hasty about the children, about everything. We can work things out. I understand that they need you to take care of them for a while longer. He cocked his head and narrowed his eyes just a bit. But their daddy will be home soon, right? Suspicion raised my eyebrows. What happened, Arthur? He swiped a hand through his pale hair, grown longer since our last meeting. I'm being officially discharged. I thought maybe you and we could, all those things we talked about. Words I had longed to hear teetered on the edge of his tongue, but I didn't harbor tender feelings for Arthur any longer. I read more into the depths of his eyes than he knew, like I believed Claire had in Frank's, except she apparently saw good. She saw a future. I, on the other hand, sensed the danger in Arthur I'd overlooked before. We could what? I asked. He looked protrude. Get married, Rebecca. Isn't that what you wanted? My head screamed that everything I wanted had changed, but I shut away my unease as I considered the possibility. At the very least, I had to see if he meant what he said. I swallowed down my fear. What happened with your fiance? You never quite explained that, you know. He slapped his hat on his head, glanced back at his friend waiting in the car. Listen, I have to go. Borrowed auto and all. But I'll be back. He planted his lips on my cheek and jogged away. His friend started the engine, and they tore off down the road without a backward glance. I stared after them, shocked. The strangeness of Arthur's behavior niggled at me. Maybe he really meant what he said. Maybe I could learn to love and trust him again. But could I bring my passion for the dream back, now buried beneath my attachment to these children and their father? We wandered to the back porch, Janie and I. I tethered her to my chin and poured cream into the churn, letting my uncertainties agitate it to butter. I have a half-hearted version of over there hum from my lips. The war might be over there, but a battle as fierce as any those boys ever fought raged inside me now. I followed my heart, only to have my plans shattered like glass against granite. Not once, but twice, and now Arthur appeared again. Was he God's plan for me? He had broken my heart, and he'd never made things clear about the previous engagement. I turned faster and harder. What would Mama say if I took up with him again? Or Irene? Frank, I felt sure would be glad to be rid of me. But what about Sheriff Jeffries? More questions than answers arose from my musing. Questions and a lump of butter beneath my plunger. Long after the children drifted to sleep, I sat at Aunt Annabelle's desk, chewing the end of the fountain pen. Words didn't come as easy as I'd thought they would. My hand refused to write. Mama, Arthur came back. Long ago, as a little girl, I had dreamt of a wedding day. I'd walk into our little church in Downingtown on my daddy's arm. I'd lean on my husband's. Mama's roses would adorn my hair as well as the altar. Afterwards, at home, we'd eat cake and drink lemonade while neighbors and our friends wished us well. That faceless man who stood beside me, holding my hand, would be completely at ease with everyone around him. He'd slip seamlessly into my world as I would into his. But I couldn't make Arthur's face fit into the picture anymore, no matter how hard I tried, and the thought of his elusiveness on both occasions since that day at the airfield made me shiver. Unbidden, Frank's face appeared in my mind, his agony in the graveyard, the love that spilled out of his eyes as he listened to his children around the dinner table, the feel of his hand on my head as I was ill. I dropped my pen, trying to keep my thoughts from following trails that led to nowhere, but I still couldn't bring myself completely back to Arthur. As much as it pained me to admit it, I'd allowed my head to be turned by a flattering tongue and a pretty face. I thought he was everything good and honorable, but his actions had proved him to be exactly the opposite. I didn't think I could sacrifice the dream of a good man even for the promise of adventure. Restless feet carried me to the window. I lifted the sash just enough to let in a swirl of cold air and after dark sounds. A bird called. Another answered. I spied a bright red wing, and I knew it was the pair of cardinals nesting between the twisted branches of the rose and the crowd that crawled along the fence, where they were discussing their home, their children. They tweeted again before turning silent, with a longing so deep it surprised me. I realized my time to nest had arrived too, even if it meant setting aside long held ambitions. Arthur didn't fit into the picture, not anymore. And I knew in my heart Sheriff Jeffries didn't either, though he did try. I wandered back to the desk. There in the cubby in front of me sat Frank's letters. The few written to his wife, more to Aunt Annabelle, a couple to me. I pulled out the picture I'd once studied in ignorance. Now, the now familiar grin made Frank's easy to spot, even from a distance. I ran my finger over the colorless image. If I were honest, I'd admit that what I really wanted was what I'd sworn I'd never have. And if I couldn't have what my heart longed for now with such a fierce and sweet desire, I wouldn't settle for something less. I'd trust the Lord before I jumped at the next handsome face and promise of adventure. I pulled a sheet of paper to me. Arthur, we cannot be together, now nor ever. I am not sure it would ever have worked between us. Please forget we ever met, Rebecca. I waved the ink dry and read it over. A bit harsh, maybe, but not undeservedly so. I sealed the envelope and for the last time addressed it to Arthur Sampson. I only wish that he'd receive it as fast as a telegram so I know it was over for good. But a telegram would have been cruel, as well as an uneasy expense. I could be patient. Back in the parlor, I picked up the big Bible and read until my head nodded. Then I stumbled up the stairs and knelt beside my bed. Help me to be patient, Lord. Help me to trust you. The words stopped. On my knees in the dark silence, I realized that by committing my way to the Lord, I'd accepted a journey into the unknown. Fear trembled my heart. Maybe I didn't crave adventure as much as I thought I did. All right. We're leaving off with chapter 43. So I want to thank you all who came out to listen to the book reading. I really appreciate you all showing up, hitting those thumbs up, and sharing me out. It really helps us out. I hope you enjoyed the last 3 chapters. We just have a few more to go, and we'll be finished up. I think we've got a total of, is it 43? 45. We got a total of 45 chapters. So we got 2 more chapters to go, you guys. But thank you so much. Remember, you're not alone. You're loved. And until next time, stay happy, healthy, and safe. I hope to see you Monday night at 7 p.m. Eastern Standard Time. Bye. Thank you, Living by Faith. Appreciate that.